I have to imagine, Guy, that many of the founders that you've interviewed are often like a lot of the EntreLeadership small business men and women that we work with, where they would almost call themselves an accidental leader. They had this sense of purpose and a passion to solve a problem, and they look up one day and they go, "Oh my gosh, there's 50 people looking at me to know something about leadership and how to run I'm a CEO. I didn't expect to get here. I didn't go get my MBA. I didn't go to school for this." And this idea of having to reinvent ourselves to stay up with the organization. What have you seen have been the challenges and maybe some of these inflection points in a business where the bottleneck becomes the leader? The person who started it is now the lid. John Maxwell says sometimes we're the lid as the leader, and we become the bottleneck, and everything rises and falls on leadership. What are those inflection points and maybe some stories where you saw, wow, this person figured out how to really reinvent themselves?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think that as you are forced to take on more leadership roles, I think most of us naturally kind of rise to that moment, because I don't think that you have to have charisma to be a great leader. You don't have to be able to jump on stage like Steve Ballmer and pump your fist, but it's something that even those who are uncharismatic, and by the way, many of the founders I've interviewed are naturally uncharismatic, but their charisma comes as they really begin to develop their businesses and begin to see themselves as a leader. A big part of this is how we see ourselves. And I think that we all have this capacity, again, to reimagine who we are. We are not fixed in a time and a place in our lives. There's so much research about this. Harvard psychologist Dan Gilbert has done so much research about how every roughly 10 years in our lifetime, we change. I mean, our values may not change, what we hold dear, but our big parts of our personality change. Big parts of the way we see ourselves change. I mean, even in my case, I've started 2 businesses, but I began my career as a reporter, 25 years ago. And initially, I didn't see myself as an entrepreneur. I didn't see myself as somebody who would lead teams. I really wanted to tell stories and pursue that. And I think that it is a recurring theme I find over and over and over again. I mean, Kevin Systrom started Instagram. He was a computer nerd, but he had to rise to that occasion and learn how to be a leader and learn how to talk to a large audience of people, who watched him. Even Stuart Butterfield, a lot of these folks, were toiling away by themselves. Lisa Price, who started her cosmetics company, Carol's daughter, she started it in her kitchen. The guys who founded Method Soap, I mean, it was the 2 of them working in their group house in San Francisco. They over time, as they looked around and they saw 10 people, and then it was 15 people, and then eventually 100 people, they had to figure out quickly how to lead. And in most cases, it wasn't a process of like, what do I do? What do I say? It was kind of working it out. And the charisma kind of came to them. Now, of course, there are examples of brilliant founders who just aren't right to lead the company, and in some cases they agree that the business will be better off having a CEO, and we've seen that on occasion. But I generally think that founders are almost always the best people to run their companies because they know it better than anyone else. They know the story. They know the mission. They know the reason why they get out of bed every morning. And I think time and again, the founder of a business is just the best person to inspire the people around them to want to make what they do great.
Well, it makes sense. It's their baby.
It's their baby.
Literally gave birth to this child. You started 4 or 5 years ago. You said, okay, we're going to have this podcast and this show. We're going to interview founders. I imagine you might have had some preconceived notions about leadership. Has anything surprised you along the way? Any standouts where you thought, wow, I didn't see that coming?
Oh my God. And look, at almost every interview I do, I'm surprised. Look, when I interview somebody, and when I interview people who appear in this book, I know a lot about them going into the interview. We do a lot of research. I do many, many hours of reading, but I'm also trying to trigger memories through my questions that I didn't know and that they may not have remembered until the moment of the interview. And what I find in many, many examples of my conversations with some of these titans, people like Jamie Siminoff of Ring, who sold his company for $1 billion, or Andy Dunn, who started Bonobos, or Jen Hyman, who started Rent the Runway, are people who are vulnerable, who show vulnerability, who have talked about, depression, things like depression and anxiety and just crippling moments of not knowing what to do and self-doubt. And I think that's really important because a lot of us assume that entrepreneurs are these hyper-confident, self-assured, they got it all figured out. But in virtually every case, in virtually every story I've told, somebody breaks down at some point. They remember a moment when it was all lost. I recently interviewed Joel Clark, the founder of Kodiak Cakes, the pancake company. They make amazing protein pancakes. I'm sure a lot of people know Kodiak Cakes. And 11 years ago, man, that company was bankrupt. He was looking for a buyer. He couldn't find an investor. Nobody wanted to buy that brand. He went to his dad, and his dad took a line of credit out on his home. His dad had no money. He worked for the church his whole life. He took a line of credit out on his house and gave Joel $50,000 to pay down some debts. And recounting the story, Joel just broke down. He was just shattered. He worked on this thing for 16 years. He couldn't make it profitable. Today, it's the third largest pancake maker in the country. They're looking at $200 million in revenue this year. I mean, that was 11 years ago. And I think that this idea of showing vulnerability, and I think it's been a real shift in our culture. It used to be that the leader was tough and would. Now, I think it's changed a lot.
So I'm curious, do you sense that they are generally vulnerable like that? Or I imagine there's something about that conversation with you and you triggering those memories where maybe for the first time ever, they just kind of exhale and I'm putting down some of this baggage because they're going back through that journey for the first time.
And oftentimes it's that, they are, they're revealing what we kind of already know, which is that all of us go through these moments of self-doubt. All of us have sleepless nights. All of us have times where we doubt our own abilities and we worry about whether we're going to make payroll. And when people depend on you, it's very stressful. But what I'm trying to show and what I think I have learned about entrepreneurs is that they are truly human. They are not superhuman, and it means that they have moments of crisis and moments of self-doubt. And what I tried to do with the show and with the book is to say, this person that you admire, Howard Schultz or Richard Branson or, the founders of Airbnb or, the founders of Rent the Runway or Bonobos or Method, let me tell you their story so you understand the mistakes they made, the right decisions they made, how they resolved their problems, but also the really dark crucible moments that they went through in creating this incredible brand.
I've experienced that. When I listen to these conversations, I'm driving and I kind of just get this sense of like, oh, they're like me. They're like a regular down to earth person. And oftentimes you don't perceive that when their name's in the headlines or they're on the cover of Fast Company and you kind of build them up as a god in your mind a little bit. But, you mentioned hearing their story and I think everybody has a story. You have this amazing way of just drawing the story out and getting them to be, I don't think you're getting them to be human, but you're highlighting the fact that they're the same as the rest of us.
I mean, I think a big part of that is bringing as much empathy as you can to a conversation. And trying to, what I try to do is I try to jump into that person's movie, right? Like we all like consciousness, human consciousness, I think the best description is it's our own movie. Like when you walk around, you're seeing everything from your perspective, and your day is your experience and your perspective. And that's your movie in your brain. And it's very rare for any of us to be able to jump into someone else's movie, into their real-time experience. And that's what I'm trying to do. I want to be in the passenger seat, and I want to be there and say, I'm here with you. Let's go on this journey. And I think that's one of the reasons why we're able to really get some of these intimate details from people, because that, revealing those things that are only in your head to me and to our listeners can be cathartic.